You've probably blown a serious chunk of cash at the mechanic on something you could have avoided with 2 minutes of attention every couple of weeks. And honestly, it's not your fault. Nobody ever taught you the basics. That changes today. Stick around to the end because I've got a tire tip that can literally save your life. And most people have absolutely no idea. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Ring the bell too, because every week I drop content like this, straight to the point, no filler. For people who want to take care of their car without going to mechanic school, and drop a comment below telling me what you're driving, I want to know what you're rolling in. Let's start at the beginning. Pop in the hood. Sounds obvious, right? You'd be surprised how many people fumble this. On almost every American car, the release lever is on the driver's side. Low near your left knee, you pull it once, and the hood cracks open a bit, but it doesn't lift all the way. That's because there's a secondary safety latch. Walk to the front of the car, reach under the hood, feel around for a lever or a button, and then the whole thing swings up. That secondary latch exists, so if you forget to close the hood all the way, it doesn't fly open at 70 miles per hour on the highway, because if it does, bye-bye, windshield, bye-bye, you. Now, with the hood up, you need it to stay that way while you work. Newer cars have hydraulic struts that hold it up on their own. Older cars have that metal rod you prop into a little hole. The problem with hydraulic struts is that over time they get weak and the hood starts drifting down on its own. If that happens while your head is underneath, not a great situation. There's a cheap clip, a few bucks on Amazon or at any AutoZone or O'Reilly, that locks onto the strut shaft and fixes the issue. Totally worth keeping one of those in your glove box. All right, with everything secured, let's talk about the checks you should be doing every 2 weeks or so. Not overkill. It's the bare minimum to avoid getting blindsided. First up, engine oil. This is your car's lifeblood. Here's how it works. Start the car. Let it warm up for a few minutes. Shut it off and wait about a minute. Then pull the dipstick. On most modern American cars, F150S, Silverados, Corollas, Civics, it's usually a bright yellow loop or handle, clearly labeled. Pull it out, wipe it with a clean rag, push it all the way back in, pull it out again. Now you read it. You'll see to marks and Minimax. You want to be somewhere between them. The space between those two marks is typically about 1 quart of oil. So if you're right in the middle, add half a quart. Simple as that. One important detail, if the engine is cold, the oil level will look lower than max. That's totally normal. Oil expands when it heats up. Ideally, check it when the engine is warm, like right after you pull into the driveway. Shut the engine off, wait a minute, and check. If the oil is low, top it off with the correct grade for your car. That info is on the oil cap itself or on a sticker under the hood. But here's the thing. If you top it off and a week later, it's low again. Time to investigate. Note the level, write down the date and your mileage. Check again after 300 or 400 miles. If it dropped again, head to a shop with that data. You'll save time and money by walking in with actual information instead of just vibes. Next item, coolant. A lot of people call it radiator water, but it's actually a specific mix that keeps your engine at the right temperature. And here's where people get confused. Most cars have 2 coolant reservoirs. One is the actual radiator. It's got a big cap with a warning symbol on it. The other is the overflow or expansion reservoir, a small plastic bottle off to the side. People often wonder why there are 2 and think something's wrong with their car. Here's how it works. The cooling system is sealed and pressurized. When the engine heats up, coolant expands and needs somewhere to go. That's the overflow bottle. When the engine cools down, it pulls that coolant back in. So the overflow tank is the one with min and max markings, and that's where you check the level. If the engine is cold, the level will be below max. If it's hot, it'll be near max. Totally normal. The problem is, when the engine is hot and the level is at min or below, or when the engine is cold and the tank is completely empty, that means a leak, and you need to deal with it ASAP. And please, never, ever open the radiator cap when the engine is hot. The system can be at 250 degrees Fahrenheit plus and under serious pressure. You'll get a blast of boiling liquid right in your face or hand. There is no situation where that is worth it. You don't need to open the radiator. The overflow tank tells you everything you need to know. For coolant, always use the correct type for your car. If you've got a Chevy, Ford, Toyota, or whatever, check the owner's manual or ask at the dealership. Mixing the wrong products can damage your hoses and even your engine. Keep a spare bottle of the right coolant in your garage. It doesn't expire as long as you keep it sealed and out of direct sunlight. Now here's a fluid that a lot of people mess with when they really shouldn't. Brake fluid. This one's delicate for a few reasons. First, it's corrosive. Gets on your skin, it's gonna sting. Gets on your paint, it starts eating through the clear coat within minutes. Use gloves if you ever handle it. And if any splashes on the body of the car, rinse it off immediately with water. But for your regular check, you don't need to open anything. On most modern American cars, the brake fluid reservoir is translucent. You can see the level right through it. Just look! Don't touch it! Here's something most people don't know. Brake fluid level drops naturally as your brake pads wear down. When your pads are new, the fluid sits at max. When the pads are nearly gone, the fluid will be near min. So the fluid level is actually an indirect indicator of your pad life. What you should never do is top off brake fluid just because you feel like it. If your pads are still good and you fill the reservoir, the next time you replace the pads, the fluid will overflow because fresh pads push the fluid back up. Just keep an eye on the level and track it. If it drops significantly between checks and you haven't swapped pads recently, that could mean a leak in your brake system. That's serious? Get to a shop immediately. Quick story. A buddy of mine with a 2020 Camry spent 2 months thinking a weird noise when he turned the wheel was just a car thing. Know what it was? Power steering fluid that was nearly empty. By the time he got to a shop, the pump was already damaged. The repair cost almost 3 times what it would have been if he'd caught the leak early. That's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to avoid here. Speaking of power steering, a lot of newer cars don't use hydraulic power steering anymore. They've switched to electric power steering, which uses no fluid at all. If you've got a newer Chevy Equinox, Ford Escape, Honda CR-V, or most current model year vehicles, you can skip this part. But if you're driving something older or a model that still runs hydraulic, the process is similar to checking coolant. The power steering reservoir has separate hot and cold marks. Check it at the appropriate temp. If it's low, add the correct fluid for your car. And if you hear a whine or groan every time you turn the wheel, pull over soon and check that level. Running the pump dry can destroy a component that costs anywhere from $150 to $600 or more to replace, depending on your vehicle. Now, let's talk about the air filter. This is the item mechanics love to recommend replacing, and it's not a scam. It's because people never look at this thing. The good news is that replacing an air filter is probably the easiest maintenance job you'll ever do. On most cars, it's just opening a plastic box held by clips or screws, pulling out the old filter, dropping in the new one. You can find a specific YouTube tutorial for your exact make and model in under 3 minutes. The filter itself runs anywhere from $12 to $35 at AutoZone, Advance Auto, or even Walmart. How do you know when it's time to change it? Pull it out and look. One side will be relatively clean, the other will be clogged with dirt, bugs, leaves, whatever. If the intake side is seriously dirty, time for a new one. Don't try to clean it with compressed air or smack it against the tire like it's a doormat. You can tear the internal pleats and create a gap that lets dust flow straight into your engine. The filter costs $20. Your engine does not. If you're in a city with heavy traffic and bad air quality, Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, you'll go through filters faster than someone in a rural area, but generally, check it around every 15,000 to 20,000 miles. Let's talk batteries. I'll be blunt. If your battery is more than 5 years old, replace it. Stop tempting fate. Batteries don't give you a heads up when they're about to die. Just die. And it's always on a Monday morning. You're already late, stuck in a parking garage, in the heat or the cold. The battery has zero sympathy for you. Here's the one thing that'll save you. When you replace the battery, grab a Sharpie and write the month and year directly on the battery. Big, readable. That way, you'll never have to try to remember or ask the mechanic when the last replacement was. You open the hood and, about cleaning battery terminals. Over time, you'll see a white or grayish crusty buildup on the terminals. That's from the gas the battery releases as it charges, and it deposits on the metal. That buildup actually conducts electricity between the positive and negative terminals and slowly drains your charge. To clean it, wear gloves, use a damp rag, and if it's really built up, a small wire brush does the trick. Keep it out of your eyes and toss the rag when you're done. Now we get to the part that everyone ignores, and that can actually cost you your life. Tires. Your tires are the only thing connecting your car to the road. Every bit of braking, every stability system, all that engineering, it all depends on the tires. And yet people glance at them from 6 feet away, think looks fine, and move on. Let's start with tread depth. The legal minimum in most US states is to 30 seconds of an inch, which lines up with the wear indicator bars molded into the tread grooves. When the tread is level with those bars, you're legally required to replace the tire. But honestly, by that point, your performance, especially in rain, is already badly compromised. Get a tread depth gauge. They're like $5, $10 on Amazon. Measure in 3 spots on each tire, both edges and the center, because the tire can wear unevenly and look fine from one angle while being almost bald on the other side. The lowest number you find is your real tread depth. New tires typically start at 10-30 seconds. Below for 30 seconds, start planning for replacements. Below 230 seconds, the tire is a genuine safety risk. But tread isn't the only thing that matters. Age counts too, and almost nobody checks this. Every tire has a code molded into the sidewall called the dot number. The last 4 digits are what matter. They tell you the week and year of manufacture. If you see 2,222, that tire was made in the 22nd week of 2022. Why does this matter? Because rubber ages. It dries out, gets hard, and develops a tire that's 6 years old, even if it looks fine visually and has plenty of tread, has degraded rubber and can be more dangerous than a more worn tire that's only 2 years old. General safety guideline. Start thinking about replacement when a tire hits 5 years from its manufacture date. Not necessarily chuck it in the trash tomorrow, but start researching prices and planning past 6 years. Replacement is strongly recommended regardless of how it looks. While you're checking the tires, inspect the sidewalls for bubbles or cracks. A bubble on the sidewall means there's internal structural damage and that tire can blow out at any time. Do not mess around with this. And pressure. The correct PSI for your tires is printed on a sticker inside the driver's door jamb or sometimes on the fuel door. That number is what you want, not the number on the tire itself. Check pressure when the tires are cold, meaning before you've driven anywhere, get a digital tire pressure gauge. They're like $10, $15 and last forever. Check all 4 tires every 2 weeks. Proper inflation improves fuel economy, makes the tires last longer, and helps you stop faster. It's literally free money and free safety. Now, before you close the hood, here's the mistake that costs people money at the body shop. You don't close a hood the way you slam a door. Don't push down hard from above. Lift it to the right height. Let it drop under its own weight, like closing a car door gently. Forcing the hood down can dent it, and that repair isn't cheap. After it closes, give it a gentle upward push to confirm it's latched. If it pops back up, the latch needs adjustment. Don't drive with a hood that isn't fully latched. Let's wrap up with a few general care habits that make a huge difference over time. First, cleanliness. Sounds superficial. It's not. A clean interior doesn't trap debris between components, doesn't have loose stuff rattling around creating phantom noises, and lasts much longer. Get in the habit of clearing out anything that doesn't belong in the car every time you park. Food and drink residue destroys interiors over time. You don't have to be obsessive about it, but a dry microfiber wipe on the dashboard and door panels every now and then makes a noticeable difference. Inside, the most neglected surface is the inside of the windshield. There's a film that builds up from the ACIU breath and just the environment, and it kills nighttime visibility. Cleaning the inside of your windshield with a clean microfiber and some glass cleaner once a week genuinely transforms driving at night. Sounds like overkill until you do it and see the difference. On exterior washing, if you live near the coast, think Florida, California, the Gulf, the Pacific Northwest, or anywhere that uses road salt, in winter, pretty much anywhere, with real winners, the Midwest, New England, the Mid-Atlantic. Washing your car regularly isn't vanity, it's protection. Salt eats through the undercarriage and frame. You can't see it happening, but it is. If you deal with road salt or salt air, washing every 2 weeks is closer to necessity than habit. And to close this out, I want to be clear about something. You don't need to be a mechanic. You don't need to understand how engines work. You don't need to become a car guy or gal. You just need 15 minutes every couple of weeks checking the basics I showed you today. Engine oil, checked. Coolant, checked. Brake fluid, eyeball it. Take note. Power steering fluid checked if your car uses it. Air filter inspected every so often. Battery, you know when it was last replaced. Tires, pressure, tread depth, and manufacture date checked. That's it! With this routine, you'll catch small problems before they become expensive ones. You'll walk into any shop with information, not just a look on your face that says, please take all my money, and your car will last a whole lot longer. If this video helped you, hit like right now. It genuinely matters for the channel and helps me keep making content like this. And if you've got a question, something a car did that you didn't understand, a noise, a warning, lights, whatever, drop it in the comments. I read every single one and reply as much as I can. You can also suggest the next topic down below. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and share this video with that one person you know who's never popped their hood in their life. You might be doing their car a favor, or maybe even them. See you in the next one.